Hey folks, it's DragonKeeper96600. I hope you had an awesome Labor Day yesterday. As promised, I'm here to give my final thoughts on all of Season 1 of Transformers Robots in Disguise. Now, this is kind of a tall order considering I usually, when I'm asked to review something lately, I've been ranting on for 40 minutes about an episode that was only 5 minutes. So I'm gonna have to not get to say everything that I probably would normally say. I'm gonna have to try to shorten this to a reasonable length, but I do feel like there are some things that I want to go over, and there's a lot that I've already criticized in my reaction vids, like recurring plot points and writing gaffes and stuff like that, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. So I'm going to stick to stuff that I've noticed about the show that I haven't had the time to really get into in the reaction vids due to their limited runtime and me being focused on the pretty images on the screen. So I think it's best if I start off talking about RID Season 1 by talking about its history. A lot of you know that Robots in Disguise is the sequel to Prime and is far lighter in tone than Prime ever was, being more brightly lit, with more colorful characters, less dire stakes in general, and just being more kid-friendly. Well, the truth is, some of you have been wondering why that is. Now, according to IMDb, I don't know how true this is, but it seems plausible to me, so I'm going to repeat it. Hasbro was not entirely satisfied with the performance of Prime. True, it's an Emmy Award-winning series, but the ratings apparently were not very good, and toy sales were sort of lower than what Hasbro was expecting. And since Hasbro is a toy company, the toy sales from the show, or what it's primarily focused with, never mind that the toy sales would probably be better if the toys were on the shelves before Season 3, but that's not the point. So what they wanted to do with Robots in Disguise is actually make a show that would cater to kids who grew up with rescue bots, but are now too old for it. So Robots in Disguise is like a lighter Prime, but it's also a darker Rescue Bots. So I think this explanation is sufficient for explaining a lot of why Robots in Disguise is the way it is. For instance, why there aren't that many callbacks to Prime in the first season. I know there are more in the second season, but for the first season, they're aiming for kids who have seen Rescue Bots and aren't familiar with Prime since Mommy sat down with her 7-year-old son for the first episode and saw Starscream jam his entire hand into Cliffjumper's chest and decided that he wasn't allowed to watch Prime anymore. So, a lot of kids might not know about it, and maybe the show would spark their interest and they'd go back and watch it or whatever. So that's what Robots in Disguise is trying to be, is basically rescue bots like darker and edgier, not a lighter Prime. But knowing that, it seems like the show suffered a lot at first from trying exactly to figure out what it was trying to be, even with all those limitations set on it by Hasbro. For instance, I've already talked about how Denny's personality changes radically from the first 2 episodes throughout the series. It was a change for the better, but it is noticeable. It was like the writers are trying to figure things out, and how exactly the lore and such is supposed to work. We only see Cybertron very briefly before we're suddenly bamfed to Earth, and the way we got there is kind of rushed. In fact, a lot of the story in Robots in Disguise is rushed, and I know this is going to bug you, but before I made this video, I compiled a list of bitchy RID questions. And for this list, I thought I'd go over a lot of plot points that haven't been addressed as of Season 1 that are really frustrating. I feel like could have been addressed instead of... I get this hasn't been a very continuity-heavy season, and apparently that'll change next season, but, the episodic nature sort of reminds me of the early days of animated, where, they had a different human villain every episode, and people were also complaining about how kiddie that show was. And, it took them a while to get into the real continuity things and get, deeper plot lines going. So... a user has already informed me that the questions I asked about Fixit will be answered in Season 2, but I thought I'd go through some things that I feel like the show could have handled better real quick. So, here we go.
The pods can only be unlocked from the command console, or they explode.
Number 1. When and why did Fracture join Steeljaw's pack? He seemed to have a source of income and wasn't a criminal back on Cybertron. What made him give up his home planet? Number 2. If the Decepticons are fitted with tracking devices, why do they seem to only pop up one at a time? Number 3. Why was Grimlock a Decepticon? He seemed pretty easy to recruit as an Autobot. Was he created by Shockwave, like in the video games? Number 4. How devoted were any of the Decepticons to Megatron's cause? Is it true that the Autobot Council is branding criminals with the insignia, as some fans suggest? If so, why do so many of the inmates seem to identify themselves as Decepticons? Number 5. If this show takes place 3 years after Prime, as seems to be the case, then how did Cybertron become a completely... can't read my own writing, revitalized society in that time? Number 6, where did all the inhabitants of Cybertron come from? Were they hiding out on other planets, or were they all born in the past 3 years? Sideswipe and Strongarm are described as teenagers. Did they emerge from the well at that age? Number 7, who was in that pod Steeljaw was trying to open way back in trust exercises? Strongarm later reports all the pods were empty. Did Steeljaw just not realize this? Number 8, why didn't the Primes ever tell Optimus that he was facing the Fallen? Seems like he'd take his training more seriously if he knew. Number 9, why didn't Windblade wake up for any of the crises in Prime if she was sent to protect the Earth? Number 10, how exactly was Megatronus imprisoned? It's the motivation for his revenge and we know nothing about it? Furthermore, what role could Earth have played? Cybertron makes sense, but Earth, which is established to be Unicron? Why would Unicron lock up his own herald? Number 11, why hasn't the Earth government noticed any of the Cybertronian activity on Earth? In Prime, nothing could happen without Agent Fowler calling the Autobots, and now there's not a peep. Number 12, furthermore, why hasn't the American government stayed in contact with Cybertron? Considering their history with the Autobots, wouldn't they be interested? And number 13, how advanced is the state of Earth's technology if humans will just accept giant colorful animatronics walking around without so much as a peep? A lot of factories and workplaces seem to be fully automated a la animated. Seems like a lot of advancement for just 3 years.
I never considered that.
And I can already hear you guys typing furiously in the comments trying to answer all the questions I brought up, but that's the thing. You're having to answer the questions. Why hasn't the show answered them? I know we talked about show don't tell, but showing something would be nice. The point about Fracture and Windblade in particular brings up something that this show actually kind of has in common with Prime, which is, well, maybe not so much, which is kind of rushed character development. Like, they just kind of present a character, here they are, and here are all their traits. And they don't really go into any depth into character. Now, with Prime, we spent a lot of time with our characters. Like, once they were introduced, we were with them for a long time. And so we got to see more of their personality develop slowly. But because of the episodic format of Robots in Disguise, a lot of times a character will show up once and then never again. Some characters will recur, but even they don't seem to get as much depth as maybe they would get in the hands of, I don't know, more patient pacing of a different show. The reason I say this is similar to Prime is because in Prime, this was one of the few genuine criticisms the show had, is that a lot of times characters wouldn't reach their full potential or plot lines would be dropped because the characters would die. And that's a pretty serious flaw to have. I remember how upset everyone was when Breakdown died. It was not only because it was sad and we liked Breakdown, but because it seemed like Breakdown had the potential to be a bigger character. There was one point in Prime, I think it was... I don't remember the name of the episode, but it's the one where Breakdown is kidnapped by Mech. And basically, at the end, Starscream says, there will come a day when you, Breakdown, have to choose between myself and Megatron. That day never comes because Breakdown died. And there's a lot of examples like that in the show, where a character just fails to reach their potential because they didn't live. Robots in Disguise doesn't have that excuse, though. The characters live, but they're shut away or their potential is just kind of ignored. Like, I really would be interested to see why Fracture joined Steeljaw's pack. It happened in between episodes. That's something that I think I'm not alone in saying we'd be interested to see. Like, really interested. Fracture is one of my favorite Decepticons in this show, and it sucks that such a vital step was skipped like that. This is something else. I have talked a little bit about the animation, how it changes frame rate from going from more stop-motion-y almost look to a much more fluid look. And it seems like the fluid look in general is better, with one exception. There's one clip from Battlegrounds Part 2 where Megatronus says the line precisely.
Precisely.
And the animation at that point was almost too fluid. Like, it looked uncanny. Like, his mouth, like, warped weirdly, and, like, seeing all that movement was a little much. But, so, like, the show needs to find a balance between things looking really choppy and things looking so fluid it reminds you of slime. It's fluid like slime. It's like, no. So, if they could find a middle ground and not constantly either be hurting my eyes or weirding me out, that would be great. But in general, though the art style is different from Prime, I feel like I have gotten used to it and grown to appreciate it. It's pretty bright and colorful, fitting the show's lighter tone. And a lot of the designs, I've talked about this before, but a lot of designs I really like. I'm not crazy about the Decepticon Hunter armor. I feel like the pastel blue is really shapeless looking. It doesn't really have the same amount of depth, but a lot of the Decepticons and even the Autobots look really cool. Not all of them are winners. Like, Malador's design is boring. I've already talked about how I'm not a fan of Ground Pounder's design, but there are three in particular I really want to talk about. Springload, Thunderhoof, and who was the third one? I forgot. I really wanted to talk about it, but I don't remember, so I'll talk about the other two. Springload I really like because, first of all, the animal designs, not everyone's a fan of them. I like them. I think they're creative. I like the greater range of diversity on Cybertron, and I like this image of Cybertron as like this chowder-like society where like human-like Transformers will walk around and on the street pass by like a frog or deer person or something like that. It's just like that diverse and that weird. I feel like befits an alien race and looks really cool. Springload, though, has this, like, kind of intensity about him, like with the sharp, jagged teeth and, like, the animalistic eyes and the eyebrows, and he just seems very expressive, and especially, like, in scenes where he's with Quillfire, and Quillfire is more humanoid than him and moves with genuinely this, generally, not genuinely, the same kind of human pace as like the Autobots do, where Springload is like hopping behind him, and like that contrast is pretty great. I'm also a lot of times impressed with like how characters seem to have unique motion. Like Steeljaw has the swinging tail and the twitching ears, and he even wrinkles his muzzle when he's mad like a real dog would. And the way that I've already gushed about the way that Pseudo transforms, and that was really cool. And I'm trying to like think wildly. Oh yeah, the third person I just remember whose design I really liked was Night Strike. I love the colors. I like bats. A lot of the I like this design comes from I like animals, but I do. And I think it was really striking with the black and white contrasted with the like bright blue network of veins on the back of his wings. That was really visually pleasing. The reason I want to talk about Thunderhoof is because he looks pretty ridiculous in the stock art with those giant antlers. I remember the first time I saw him before I even started watching the show, like, what? It looks dumb. But the reason I liked Thunderhoof's design isn't because of the body or the very noticeable head appendages. It's actually his face. And a lot of people have talked about, like a lot of weirdos on Tumblr have talked about how handsome Thunderhoof is. And this is something I've seen over and over. And the reason is the face is like very wild. Like if you look at his optics, they're like solid red, but instead of like having solid white pupils like in Animated or Prime, they have like white rings. Like Fracture has solid red eyes, Steeljaws are yellow, but something about the contrast in Thunderhoof's with the white and the bright red, it makes him look really crazed. He actually looks, he has the gaze that's most like a wild animal out of all of the very animalistic Decepticons in the show. It's just, it looks like in like Looney Tunes when a character's really mad and their eyes start flashing different colors and like this growing out ring, it looks like that. And combined with the eyebrows above it, it's just, even though he's the most humanoid of the animalistic Decepticons in Steelja's pack, he seems the most wild just from that look. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a YouTube video I kind of like where this deer hunter kind of thought it would be a good idea to spray himself with female deer hormones when he's going hunting. So a buck shows up and beats the shit out of him because deer are nasty creatures. And I feel like if a deer could emote like a human, it would look like Thunderhoof in that instant. It's a really intense look befitting an unstable mobster like Thunderhoof. I have talked a lot of negative about the show so far, but I do like it, and it did take me some time getting used to it, especially since it is a sequel to Prime, even though they're trying to attract an audience that didn't watch Prime. Because it's tied to Prime, we can't help comparing it, like it's inevitable, and I feel like that is a weakness of the show, that it's being tied to Prime and it has to be compared to it. But that being said, there are some things I like and that do work. For instance, let's talk about the biggest one, Steeljaw's character. I don't think liking Steeljaw is a rare opinion. Pretty much everyone likes him. We can't keep the furries away from our fandom because of Steeljaw. And it's not... Okay, Steeljaw, I think, is one of the scariest villains in the Aligned continuity. Like, for real. I know we've had world-devouring horrors, maniacal dictators, and fucking giant bugs, but Steeljaw is the one who unnerves me the most. And it's because there's something really realistic about him. We know people like him exist. Like the super suave charmer who can say anything to get you to trust him, but who's actually really greedy and kind of psychotic underneath it. It's really common, and it's like a personality type that I feel like girls especially are told to watch out for. Like, watch out for flatterers. Watch out for people who make you feel important but actually don't think of you that much.
You still don't understand. I want to help you. I'm sorry I lied. I didn't know if I could trust you. Oh, cadets can be wonderful, if used properly.
Early on, Steelja's got this real suave manner of carrying himself, where he tries to convince you that what he wants is for the best. And a great example is when he slashes Thunderhoof's insignia early on when they first meet, and he tells him the pain is necessary without explaining why he did that or asking him permission. He just kind of did it and said it was what was best for him. And that's scary as shit. And what's so scary about it is that it actually kind of seems to be working on the audience. A lot of fans of the show think Steeljaw should have the Earth. And I've seen a lot of fans, some of them on my channel, though I won't drop names, trying to justify everything he does because he's so charming. That's freaky deaky. I mean, what? You know he's the bad guy, but you like him anyway. And wow. He's good. He is good. And I feel like a lot of the reason this works is because of Troy Baker's voice acting. The guy's, he's got real talent. The only thing I've really heard him in that I can name off the top of my head is Booker DeWitt in BioShock Infinite, but I think that alone can convince you of his talent. And he has that kind of suave, honey-like tone.
In the meantime, you want to remain free? You stay with me.
And more than that, he can actually get really emotional. I feel like a lot of his standard villain lines work because of the intensity of that voice acting.
Do you want a non-functioning human? Accelerate the process and open the pods right now!
Honestly, Steeljaw is actually, a lot of people have been comparing him to Starscream. And it's true that he does have a lot of similar traits to Starscream. But I think what makes him scarier is that he's got this... Well, Starscream, it was difficult a lot of times in Prime to tell whether he was lying or not, whether he was really wanted to change sides or whether he was really loyal. Starscream had this level of incompetence that prevented him from ever being considered a true threat. We were unsure about him, but we also weren't afraid of him because he was a giant dork. Steeljaw doesn't have that. He's totally calm, he's totally in control, and when he loses control, he becomes fucking terrifying. He doesn't panic and whimper like Starscream does. And, that makes him scarier and is actually less cartoony than Starscream. And yes, that is the one aspect of the show where RID is less cartoony than Prime. The one. The un. Solo. I actually got in a discussion with this earlier with a commentator, but Steeljaw seems like the type who, when he loses control of his emotions, he loses control. Like when Megatron got angry, he got violent and he said harsh things, but you never got the feeling that he was saying something he didn't mean or hurting someone that he didn't mean to. He was very deliberate and he knew how to use his anger to turn to a weapon and make people fear him. Steeljaw, though, seems to be unable to handle his emotions. They just go wild. One moment I love is when he throws himself in Megatronus, knowing he has to know that he can't take Megatronus. And Megatronus just throws him back, and then the next shot, you see Steeljaw is going at him again.
All I wanted was a place for Decepticons to call their own. A place I could rule!
His anger carries him away, and he will never stop. He knows what he wants, and when he doesn't get what he wants, he loses control. And the whole suave thing, the whole I'm for the good of the Decepticons, maybe he truly believes that he believes it, but from what I've seen so far, it seems to be an act. He's out for power, man. Don't you stand in his way. But he's slow and deliberate and careful about it. And that makes him a cool villain. Like, really cool. I know we'll see more of him next season. I'm looking forward to it. I've talked about Steeljaw. Let's talk about Bumblebee. I feel like the arc of this show, Bumblebee trying to learn to be a leader, is a good one. Like, it's a little clumsy at some points, but contrasting Bumblebee with Optimus was probably a smart choice, and explicitly showing Bumblebee fail to try to be like Optimus was also a good one, even though it made me cringe myself inside out. It was still an important moment to show that you can't excel by trying to ape someone else. And their growing camaraderie with the team was nice to see. I feel like it took a little too long, especially with Strong Arm and Sideswipe. I know that their thing is that they're supposed to butt heads all the time, but the fact that they do it constantly for such shallow reasons got tiring. So near the end of the season, when they start to actually tolerate each other, it was refreshing and nice to see. The Autobots in general are likable, with the exception of some dickhead moments from Strong Arm and Sideswipe, but even then have their moments. And I love Fixit and Grimlock. I mean, Fixit is just a darling, and Grimlock is a much taller darling. They both have, what they have in common is this tendency to fuck up, but try really hard and be very loyal to the team, and learn from their fuck-ups, which I think is the most important thing. Fixit was quick to get over his dismissal of Denny and even trusted him completely to operate on him. That's some real development. Grimlock's switch from Decepticon to Autobot is a little confusing in light of the question I rose earlier of how much of a Decepticon was he in the first place. But even that is done not well, but in a way that makes Grimlock sympathetic. Like, he doesn't struggle too much with being an Autobot, but you do see him struggle against prejudice. Like, Strongarm distrusts him, and Steeljaw uses his status as a Dinobot to trick his friends into thinking that he was never one of them. And, of course, there's Scowl's temptation. And while it's not a huge part of the show or Grimlock's arc, it is there, and Grimlock's willingness and responsibility, especially compared to those hot-rodding teenagers, was quick to win me over. I'm not too impressed, on another note, with the choreography of the show in general, with fight scenes, but there are a few that really stand out. Grimlock's fight with Ground Powder was excellent. Optimus's fight with Megatronus also had its moments. I particularly loved the shot. I gushed about it during the episode where, like, Optimus sort of charges at Megatronus, and I think Megatronus flips over him and hits him from behind, and that was cool. There's also, like, one moment, I didn't notice it until I was making my AMV, Ain't No Rest for the Wicked. There's one shot, like, where Octopunch is swinging around and slapping Grimlock and Bumblebee, and I didn't notice it at the time, but that's actually a really beautiful dynamic shot, the way he's swinging off the ceiling and the camera's rotating and swatting them around. I don't think there's ever been a shot like that in Prime. Like, I'm thinking hard, and I can't think of one. And don't get me wrong, the art style of Prime is gorgeous and still looks good 6 years later. But that shot had a lot of motion and energy that I really liked. And I think that's where the animation of RID excels. Not in frame rate, not in clarity, but in just the uniqueness of motion between the characters. And it's not the best ever, but it is good. And I feel like we should, praise good things when we see them. Trying to think, is there anything else I wanted to go over really quick? Again, I've talked a lot about RID in my reaction vids, but I've talked about issues with pacing. I've talked about how the B plot of an episode doesn't always have anything to do with the A plot. I'm pretty sure I've talked about how having a new character every episode limits the character development you can do and how it makes the characters gimmicky. I feel like that's it. I mean, wow, I'm impressed with myself for being able to not talk as long as I did. Again, the first season of RID seemed very experimental. Like, they're trying to figure out what they want to do, and some things worked and some things didn't. And hopefully they'll be able to take what worked and turn in an even better product next season. Or I shouldn't say they will, because season 2 has already been out, and season 3 is coming pretty soon, so I should probably stop talking about that. But anyway, for the way I see it, I should see this first season should be viewed as a sort of learning experience, trying to find out what'll work, and in light of the new audience and new demographic that they're trying to reach. So those are my thoughts on season 1, or at least all the aspects I didn't cover in my reaction vid. If you still want to discuss anything about the season, feel free to do so in the comments. I'm always ready for a chat. And by the way, as of this video, my reaction vid for Battlegrounds Part 2 has gotten over 700 hits, which is the most I've ever gotten for, which is not only the most I've ever gotten for an RID episode, it's also more than I have subscribers. Where are you people coming from? Are you just watching the episode multiple times, or... Well, whatever. If you're just cruising by without subscribing, then I'm still happy to be here, and we're gonna have a lot of fun continuing to watch Transformers together. So tomorrow, as usual, will be my next review of Combiner Wars. I'm sure I'll be able to talk for an hour about something that's 5 minutes long, as usual. But until then, it's Dragonkeeper 9600 signing off.